Love the story of Aquilo? So do we. And what better place for a story to live than in a book? That's why we're running a campaign to get the first season of Aquilo published as an actual book. Not only can you get in early, but you can help make it happen. Head over to aquilo.com/book for more details and to pre-order your copy today. Aquilo, Season 7, Chapter 13, The Gentle Touch of Nature's Fury. All pale things look like ghosts under a full moon on a clear night. Such a truth could not have been made more evident than when I saw Patience sitting on his park bench that night. His marble skin and white hoodie reflected every inch of light the night would give, making him a beacon in the dark. Aquilo Border Park was a piece of paper on which a bottle of ink had been spilled, and he was that one spot to be spared the stain. Luminous and serene, I'd never seen him shine so bright. Then again, had there been a night so clear in Aquilo's recent history? The hour, though late, feels fleeting. I want this night to last. Perhaps not forever, but at least long enough for me to find my footing after the events at the Pilvist house. Come morning, things would never be the same again. You went ahead and did it. Patience doesn't wait for me to sit before asking the question. His gray eyes trail skyward, looking for what is no longer there to see. He's no more frustrated than surprised, his question more of a statement of fact than an accusation. He may as well have been asking about my putting a down payment on a house or getting a dog. Important life moments for sure, but still mundane, all things considered. You make it sound like you already knew. About her, I mean. I sit down next to him, keeping a few inches between us for good measure. As is his habit when cornered, Patience gathers his knees up to his chin, holding on to his tibias with his hands. His fingers flex, creasing the folds of his white denim pants, a level of nerves I've never seen from him before. You could have told me, I add, taking his silence as an answer. You never asked. Don't give me that, I say. Whatever you know, you should tell me. He shakes his head like a child refusing to do homework, not bothering to look in my direction. I don't have to tell you anything, he declares, pulling himself into an even tighter ball. I like you, Miriam, but I don't think we owe each other anything, do we? Besides, I didn't think you'd be going after the great cloud this soon. It's true, I realize. While our relationship isn't that transactional, Patience and I don't have a balance sheet. We don't do each other favors. I'll tell him tales of my misadventures, and sometimes he'll put a drop of wisdom into a mug of comfort and serve it to me cold. But he isn't my guide, and if not for the length of our relationship, I may not even consider him a friend. Then there's his nebulous nature. Patience is one of Aquilo Border Park's denizens of the night, the strange amongst the strange, those too bizarre for the sun to touch. I never even thought of asking for his help saving Olivia's life. I didn't know where else to turn. No one else wants to help. Patience smiles without joy, shaking his head. He'd warned me against trying to stand between Olivia and her fate, and it feels a little stupid to ask him now if he could have done it instead. Your friend's life is in the hands of a higher power, he says, tossing me an amused look from the corner of his eye. Her own, before you ask, and there's a good chance that the battle she's fighting can't be won, but it's hers, and hers alone, to fight. He pauses, allowing me to digest his words. They feel hollow and trite. They're a dose of self-affirmation when I need solutions. How did you do it? He eventually asks, changing the subject. I didn't. The cracks were already showing, I think. All that needed to happen was for one of them to widen just a little. Even then, I think of what I had done to shatter the bonds of the great cloud. Nothing. Or, I hesitate, or it was the opposite. Like you say, it was never in my power to break her bonds. Like Olivia, this was her battle to win. All she needed was the will. Patience looks up again, eyes riveted on this empty sky above. Stars shine unhindered through the weak light of Aquilow's park. Only the moon rivals their glory, glaring down upon us with indifferent majesty. And you provided as much. He looks sad, perhaps worried, and for the first time I can see a jitter in his posture. For the first time, Patience doesn't seem content to allow events to play out as Aquilo lives and breathes without his involvement. For the first time, he seems impatient. Why did you come to me? He asks the question as if hoping it'd make me leave. This man has always been a picture of contentment, never exhibiting joy at my company, but also never annoyed, no matter what I might ask or say. Now it's as if my mere presence is an irritant, the proverbial hair in his soup. As if he knew from the beginning that this was never a courtesy call. Again, I say, I didn't know where else to turn. How did it happen? I tell the story of how Annabelle, Petunia, and I broke into the Pilvist house. I tell Patience of the carefully crafted apple and sage pie and the not-so-carefully assembled plan we executed. I tell him of the table and of how it usually behaves when tempted with buttery croissants. I explain about the seeds and show him my stash. His hand hovers over them, his fingers pinching the air above the seeds, hesitating to pick one up or even touch them. His pale extremity shivers like a leaf caressed by winter winds. The placid, almost disinterested face I've come to associate with him is replaced by one of concern and disgust. It's the same expression I remember seeing in Chef Gagnon the very first time I had him taste my chicken vol au vent. They were the first recipe we got to showcase to the world-renowned culinary superstar. All of us were nervous that day, terrified of the judgment we were about to face. But it was Gagnon who succumbed to his nerves. I think he could see it every time he hovered over my shoulder, supervising and scrutinizing my work. From the way I chopped vegetables to how I went about creating the cream sauce, he must have also smelt it once everything had been prepared and plated for his appraisal. I didn't know it then, but there was something going on behind his austere demeanor that only materialized through the rest of the semester. Gagnon was afraid, impressed, and afraid. And this is what I see now in Patience. The same form of corrupted reverence my old teacher had for my cooking, he holds for what's in my hand. It's not the seeds themselves that arrest him so. The same way my vol au vents were delicious, but otherwise nothing special, the seeds are nothing out of the ordinary. What Patience sees, and Gagnon before him, is the potential. Where the chef saw both a promise and a threat, I cannot tell what Patience notices in those seeds, but it has him on edge. "What happened when you changed the menu?" he asks, withdrawing his hand without touching. The same thing, but even more so. The table did all the same magics. It shivered and shook, then split and grew, but all with so much more intensity. When it came to life during the Pilvist ceremonies, it was already difficult to imagine how it could heal. Tonight, the damage seems irreversible. And it didn't sprout any seeds this time. Instead, it grew a monstrous bulb, big enough to fit a person. It's my turn to feel the tremors. Images from the previous hour flood back into memory. Surreal events that I would rather forget reaffirm their foothold in my mind. Breath catches in my throat, and I hesitate to continue. The retelling is like a ritual, one that I can't interrupt, but if brought to its conclusion will summon horrors I'm uninterested in having visited upon me. Patience waits, allowing me all the time I need to find my words. Never does he urge me on or show any sign that I should hurry to the next part of my story. Then, I hesitate. Then, it took Pete. Like a spoonful of scalding soup, the memory spreads. Instead of burning the roof of my mouth, then my throat, and finally the pit of my stomach, however, it goes through my senses one at a time. First, it's the image of that horrendous bulb, pulsing like an enormous heart ripped from a chest cavity, ripping open to reveal a nest of vines and tendrils. Then there's the sound of layers upon layers of vegetable flesh being torn, the liquid rending of plant matter oozing in my ears. Pete's screams are layered onto the tapestry, her horrified screeching as the vines grab a hold of her, dragging her into the bulbous maw add an abrasive texture to the tableau. Finally, there's the smell. Once Pete is fully consumed by the bulb, her entire body swallowed by the mass of vines and thorns, the whole thing begins to rot. A season's worth of decay fills the room, shaking a stunned Annabelle out of her torpor and forcing us both to flee lest we suffocate. We went back, I say, voice trembling as I finish my story. But there was no trace of her. Patience lets those last few words linger. There's no sign of the urgency that my tale should have inspired. He shows no fear or panic, instead losing himself, staring at the tree stump in the middle of the park. At this point, he's folded so tight onto himself that he looks about to vanish. You think the table ate her? I've seen platefuls of pastries devoured by that table. I don't want to imagine that's what happened to Petunia, but voicing my fears makes it real. It all comes back now. Annabelle's panicked screams, her soil-stained hands digging into every piece of rotted plant, desperate to find a clue to Petunia's whereabouts. She scratched and clawed at the desiccated branches and vines. When that didn't work, she started punching at the table and turning over chairs and kicking at the dish cabinets. When I tried to stop her, to hold her and calm her, Annabelle turned her anger on me. I reached to my shoulder, feeling the bruise left by her assault. "It's your fault," she spat at me. And I had nothing to say that could contradict her. They'd both come with me of their own volition, and it could be argued that this was Pete's plan to begin with, but I was the one to urge them in the first place. With nothing else to say and nothing else to do, I left her there. The weight of the guilt and the pain of the loss getting the better of me, I left. Patience turns to me, reading the trauma as it bubbles back up from within. For the first time since meeting, he reaches out and puts his hand on my shoulder, allowing his fingers to dig into my shirt and his palm to press down on my arm. It's meant to be comforting. Not a gesture of understanding, but one of shared company, a way of saying he's there for me. But as his finger brushes on the skin of my neck, my blood is filled with warmth. Euphoric calm spreads through my nerves, blossoming from his touch. There's no doubt of the supernatural nature of what's happening. This is no drug dulling my senses or blurring my emotions. I don't feel pulled from the situation or dissociated from myself. Instead, I'm subsumed by clarity, enough to send a shock through me. It felt like hours of meditation compressed into a single moment. "Maybe I can help?" Patience offers, craning his neck so as to see my eyes better. "The Great Cloud isn't malevolent, and there aren't a lot of structures made out of living plants in Aquilo. I can't promise that we'll find your friend there, but there is a place we can start looking." Dawn is slow to creep over the clear horizon. Finding no clouds on which to reflect itself, the sun has to wait to crest above the tree line before being seen. Never have I been more conscious of every blade of grass, every twig, and every weed I step on. Each reminds me of the bloated horror that consumed my friend, but also there's a fresh awareness of the living things that are crushed under my weight. I keep thinking of Annabelle, who would be desperate to be given some hope of finding Petunia. I thought of going back to the Pilvist house to find her, but I'd be a fool to seek her company. I've endangered her enough already. She'll be livid, of course, angry at the subtle betrayal of being denied the chance to help, but hers is a wrath I'll suffer gladly. For despite the rising sun promising to herald in a glorious day, the threat of danger stretches long over Pickering's field, longer still than the shadows of the forest. Like roots, the darkness extends through the ground, creeping over the lush crops like spilt soot. It's cold under these shadows, and the air is difficult to breathe. "Let me come with you," Patience had said, offering not help, not companionship, but merely a presence. I'd never seen Patience outside of Aquilo Border Park. To me, he was as immovable as the ancient stump that sat in a place of honor on the border. I could have imagined him baked into the crust of the park, a feature as permanent as the local topography. Now, as I trudge along between rows of wheat, I can look back to see him behind me. Each glance is a new surprise, this pale shadow of mine that mimics my every step, a witness to my folly. I jump the ditch to the forest's edge, and Patience, without hesitation, does the same. His white denim pants are stained at the hem with mud, and his white runners are caked with black soil, but he neither cares nor notices, his focus solely on me. When entering the woods, I half expect Patience to light the way with his perfect white attire and paper-hued skin. Like snow on a winter night, I want him to catch and reflect every little suggestion of light, amplifying it into an ambient halo. I want him to be the flaming sword that cuts through this darkness. But even his presence gets swallowed whole by the forest's appetite. I'm Geppetto falling into the whale's stomach, and he is my extinguished candle. It doesn't take long for the forest to take our hand and guide us to our destination. The process is far more overt this time around. There's no blurring of landmarks, light plays no tricks on us, and the trees make no secret of their shifting nature. Where I had to get lost between birches, pines, and maples to find my destination before, tonight I'm being drawn to it. A red carpet of fallen leaves, sodden and rotting from the previous fall, gives under the sole of our shoes. Wind, gentle and soft, pushes at our back, a polite suggestion like a hand on our shoulders, encouraging us in the right direction. There's a smell, sour and sweet, that calls to us from between the branches, alluring enough that it makes the stomach rumble and shift, but with an underlying putrescence so that we don't forget the imminent threat. The cracking of branches and crushing of undergrowth threatens the lurking of predators unseen. Bears and wolves, though unlikely, are the preferable alternatives. Regardless of their source, the sounds urge us forward. If I had ever imagined Patience as some sort of quiet, stoic guardian, the antithesis to the terrible demons spewed forth by this forest, our journey is proving me wrong. I wouldn't accuse him of cowardice, but nothing about the man suggests that he could step to my defense. Should danger arise, I can imagine he would stand firm and let it wash over him rather than take arms. Fear has only begun to settle in, joining us as a third companion on our journey when the trees break their ranks, ushering us into the clearing. Patience seems taken aback by the sight, though not because it is new to him. He has the face of a man visiting his childhood home, discovering it to be the same, yet changed. The structure of the house, its layout and architecture remain, but everything else has been altered by the new owners. A fresh coat of paint manifests in a carpet of colorful yarn at the foot of the thorn portal, the littering of a forgotten parade. Damaged branches that have been grown anew redecorate the gate, moving it but a few degrees off the original design. And at the center of it all, the new owner stands and waits. Petunia, but not Petunia. This creature is something new to the world, but with roots dug deep into its past. Her skin is the texture of bark, cracking in places to reveal new flesh underneath. The plump cheeks on her face are replaced with ripe fruits that grow and burst, spilling their juices down her chin before rotting and growing back again. Leaves grow from her fingertips, curling up, drying, and floating softly to the ground, burgeoning anew within seconds. Birds nest in her hair, a tussle of wheat and grass, where they hatch, mature into adulthood, only to die after flying a few circles around her head. Their bodies dissolve to bones, devoured by maggots before becoming a permanent part of Petunia's anatomy. No part of her body hasn't been replaced by some manifestation of nature, not just the bountiful rewards of a harvest or the breathtaking colors of a well-tended garden, but the full gamut of wonders and horrors the natural world has to offer. Life and death pull and dance with each other over the surface of her limbs, fighting and reproducing in a chaotic blend. Worms crawl, chrysalises hatch, flowers bloom, and vegetables rot. Entire colonies of insects swarm around her hips and thighs, each going through the full cycles of life at their own accelerated pace. Through this cacophony of unhinged growth and decay, I can still see the shape of Pete. It's less in the form of her body than it is in her language of form and expression. I can see Petunia's defiant posture in the trunks that have replaced her legs. Her mocking demeanor, that smile that laughs at most situations, is sculpted in rotting vegetation and blooming seeds. Mouth agape, eyes unblinking, I struggle to decide if it's Pete who's possessed by nature itself, or the other way around. "Petunia?" I mumble, unsure that my feeble voice will carry the distance. As if to reply, or simply in reaction to the name, a 5-petaled flower of bright purple and white sprouts from her forehead, going through the full natural cycle every other part of her experiences. She smiles, showing teeth of white chitin and gums of brown fungus. The way she tilts her head speaks of pity and condescension. Oh, what a poor mortal creature I must be in the eyes of whatever this strange and majestic being is. "Miriam Dufour," she says, using the voice from the Pilvist house. "I wondered how long it would be before one of you came for me." She extends her arms, stretching her back and filling lungs made of interwoven petals and contained by ribs of briar and bones. The way she tilts her head back, eyes shifting mucus and morning dew pointed at the heavens, it looks like she's savoring a newfound freedom, or every molecule of the forest at once. "Where's Petunia?" I demand, making a weak display of my wavering confidence. "What have you done with her?" She steps forward, closing the gap between us. Her feet never seem to leave the forest floor completely, always tethered by some root or vine. "Miriam," Patience whispers from behind me, but his warning means nothing to me right now. Fingers of living entrails, covered with tiny barnacles and coral, reach out to touch the side of my face. A tiny crab crawls down my cheek before losing its footing and plummeting to the undergrowth. From this close, I can smell her breath of orange blossoms and peat moss. "Your friend is fine," the goddess explains, like a mother comforting a child. She is my cocoon as I grow my wings, the skin I need before I can molt. With a sudden defiance of my own, I push her hand away. Steeling my stomach for the visions and fragrances that will assault me, I step closer to the goddess. My eyes are within an inch of her face, and this new proximity reveals the gruesome details of her transformation. Ants devour Petunia's left eye, while another, a white onion this time, grows from behind. A centipede pushes through from behind the cabbage leaves now covering her cheeks, crawling up her face to disappear inside an ear made of clamshells. "She's not disposable," I proclaim. "We were there to help you. She wanted to free you." The goddess steps back, her hand reaching for a heart made of red, pulsing capsicum. Her shifting features look hurt and offended, with her ever-changing eyes wide open. "Disposable? Oh, of course not. She is no such thing to me. But she was born for this. Someone must be my chrysalis. And once I am reborn, once I am back to my proper place, she will be free, restored, reborn, returned." Did Petunia know this? Is this what she meant when she said the Pilvists forced her from Aquilo? Cults often promise special purposes to their members, but few are able to deliver. And if she knew, why did she suggest we go through with it? "You worry for your friend, and that is so, so sweet of you. Not all you Dufour girls have had such a lovely disposition. But—" The goddess stops herself, closing her eyes and savoring the moment as one might the warmth of the summer sun on their face. "You hunger for more," she continues. "We all hunger for more. That is to survive. It is to thrive. But what you want—" Her lips, two pink, wriggling worms, pressed together in a joyless smile. Whatever she senses in me, whatever it is she's decided I want, she is not impressed by. "I will not give." Lovely disposition be damned, I am not having this conversation again. I push. Palm flat, I press my hand upon the living circus of decay and rebirth that is the goddess's body, and I push. Scarabs of every size scramble from between my fingers, their iridescent shells catching the glow of the fading moon above. Soil, fresh and moist, sucks in my hand like a puddle of thick mud. Confronted with an external force, the skin, muscles, and bones pulse with vitality. The goddess's chest explodes with life, from green buds of nascent plants to the hatching and first flight of 1,000 fruit flies. She takes a step back, shuffling a moment to keep her balance. "We freed you," I growl. "You owe us. Will not give? What is this? Capricious nature come to life? Am I supposed to be content with whimsy when 2 of my friends' lives hang in the balance?" I pull my hand back, ignoring my disgust at the texture and smell that follows my touch. Without flinching, I wipe the offending fingers on my pants, tightening them into a fist once I'm done. "I shattered the bars on your cage, and by all I hold holy, I will erect new ones if I have to. And believe me, if I'm pushed to it, I will make sure your new cage isn't that easily broken." An empty threat, by all accounts. But there's something in me, a fire in my spine, that makes me believe it. The goddess swearing Petunia's form looks shocked at first. Her eyebrows, a caterpillar and a shaft of wheat, rise on her crawling forehead. Both her eyes, each made of white-capped mushrooms, are wide open. The moment is brief, however, and before I have time to feel any satisfaction for my actions, the sky darkens. Dark clouds materialize from nowhere, covering the sky and plunging the clearing into absolute darkness. A light blinks from behind the goddess, little more than a flicker at first, but soon it's a localized storm. Lightning cracks from inside the thorn gate, arcing with increased intensity, an angry escalation that far outgrows the confines of the portal. Wind lashes at us, lifting the multicolored yarn and throwing it into a spiral that fills the air. So furious is the arcing electric discharge that the forest comes aglow, turning the early morning into midday. The thorns and vines of the portal itself, usually stubborn and immovable, animate at the display, twisting together like a nest of snakes struggling for warmth. "Miriam," Patience mutters, reaching to take my sleeve between his fingers. I yank my hand back. In spite of the immeasurable forces on display before me, I stand firm. I keep my back straight and refuse to back down. Something caged this goddess once, and against all reason, I am confident I could do it again. "You will give me my friend back," I command, "and you will grant my miracle." The sound of my voice is swallowed in the cacophony, the drop of a pin through an orchestral display. But it is heard. Fireflies light the sockets of the goddess's eyes as she looks at me. Her fury grows, as does the storm at the portal. The trees surrounding the clearing seem to grow taller and closer, their branches looming menacingly overhead. Yet I do not blink. "You think you're the first Dufour to threaten me?" the goddess demands. "You think yourself Philomen's equal, little witch?" The ground trembles as the roots of the forest writhe from beneath my feet. Birds and bats swarm the heavens in impossible numbers, catching the flashes of lightning from the portal. It feels like the world is about to collapse upon Patience and me while the forest floor might give out from under us. The clearing salivates at the opportunity to swallow us whole, leaving no trace for anyone to find. Yet I stand firm. The wind picks up, tossing my hair, making my jacket flap like a cape. I don't know if it's insanity or the residual calm from Patience's touch, but I remain defiant. And it works. "Fine," the goddess says, keeping the portal writhing and the wind singing. "But you only get one. Ask yourself, little Miriam, which miracle do you want?" She extends one hand, a palm of bark open to the sky. In it grows a lush, ripe, red apple. "Is it your friend whose life you would have me advocate for? A single soul worth wrestling death itself to preserve? Or—" She raises her second hand, this one a mass of twisting green branches. From those vines, a miniature version of the Hell Gate knits itself, twisting in unison with the real thing. "Would you rather I make all your other problems go away? All the lives that would be lost should the portal remain, saved but with a word from you?" As she speaks, the miniature portal unravels in one hand, and the apple rots and withers in the other. "Which one do you want, little Dufour witch? Whose hero do you want to be?" "You shouldn't have done that," Patience says, for what must be the 10th time. As with all 9 before, I ignore this admonition. His tone never goes above a whisper, and the blame in his words lacks conviction. It's more mantra than accusation. After the 6th or 7th repetition, I'm not even sure he's talking about me anymore. We didn't walk back from the forest so much as escape from its depths. Our egress through the trees felt like unwrapping the world anew, every layer of bark and foliage being pulled back to reveal a world more real with every step. By the time we stepped between those final curtains of pine and maple, it felt like the trees were eyelids peeling themselves open, putting an end to the dream. Unlike a dream, however, the memory of what now lurks around these woods will not fade. It's quite the burden to carry when going back to work, and quite the choice to weigh while serving coffee and preparing sandwiches. Before we part ways, I ask Patience for his opinion on the matter, but his answer is like the peel of a kiwi fruit, useless and prickly. "Accept no favors from fickle gods," he says, before giving me a wan smile and walking off down the street. I've never seen Patience under anything but moonlight. To see his attire colored with the shades of the rising sun is unsettling, like witnessing a jellyfish floating on air. The morning passes in somewhat of a daze. More than once, mugs overflow with scalding coffee as I lose track of time as I pour. My wraps get burnt as I forget them in the panini press. My tea becomes bitter, having steeped far too long in their cups. The dream haunts me. There is no question that it happened. The urgency of my dilemma is inescapable. While I may have hoped to find clarity or refuge in daily work, all I find is an increasing sense of dread. Any minute, I expect Annabelle to barge through the front doors, fresh accusations and recriminations on her lips. Meanwhile, the town is abuzz with the one question on everyone's lips. What happened to the great cloud? I take refuge in the back alley, bringing a half-full bag of trash with me as an excuse. The day is warm, warmer than the season would normally permit, and the shadows are precisely cut from the light, a symptom of a sun that has found direct passage from the heavens to the asphalt. Cars growl down the street on the other side of the Aquilo Cafe, and the occasional bird sings from the copse of woods that stretches near the alley in the distance. Meanwhile, I stand there like some idiot holding my half-empty bag of garbage. The raccoons are silent, probably sleeping until dinner time, when it's best to beg and scavenge for scraps. I have a stray thought for Brioche, who did not get payment for her work the previous night, though she did not look particularly hungry when I left her with Annabelle. There'll be a feast waiting for her when I have the mental bandwidth to prepare one. "Nice day," a clickety-clack voice calls out from beyond the corner. "I appreciate the warmth, but it won't last, you know." The fox saunters into the alley, head made of flesh and fur, but with a grin that could almost pass for human. She looks me up and down, reading my mood like the open book it is. Sitting down, she gives a quick lick to the fur on her right paw before returning her eyes to me, tilting her head and speaking again. "Did things not go as planned?" Skin melts and regrows, always letting the animal's skull do the talking. Even in broad daylight, the fox does not hide its supernatural nature. The phenomenon reminds me of the nature goddess, how it goes through the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, a constant hive of growth and rot. I want to offer a full, elaborate answer, to lay open my heart and expose the depths of my dilemma, but the fox seems distracted. Despite the heat, she shivers and sniffs at the air. "I have a difficult choice to make," I explain. "I want to save Olivia, but..." "Oh, were you offered another option? Something different? Something better?" I nod, unwilling to specify what's on the table. "Life is full of those little choices, isn't it? Though some are less little than others. And these fickle gods are fond of tricky dilemmas. If you ask me, you should walk away from the whole thing. But nobody listens to me. Otherwise, I'd have gotten my scarf back by now. But if you absolutely must make a decision, perhaps you should ask yourself, what would Doris do?" I cut her off. "I've heard it 1,000 times, but I'm not Doris, and Doris isn't here. And I'm not sure I'd trust her judgment anyway." The fox frowns, showing her teeth for a moment. She shakes her head, and with it, the annoyance and frustration are quick to vanish, replaced by her usual amused demeanor. No, 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 she says, skull shaking left and right. If you need Doris's opinion, there are ways you could get it. The real question you should be asking is, what would Olivia do? The bag of trash slips from my hand and onto the concrete steps. Black plastic slumps with the content, rolling down in heaps towards the cracked asphalt below. It seems so obvious now. The answer is so simple and clear. As limpid as tears and primal as despair, the choice to my dilemma is almost made for me. I hate it, of course, but what would she say if I picked the wrong option? How would she feel if I tipped the scale in the wrong direction? Did that help? The fox says as I try to open my maw. Miriam? Say, Miriam, if that did help, do you think I could get my scarf back? Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.